In these bad times for the world economy, other successful people remembered the same secret. One of these people was the great Hollywood film producer Sam Goldwyn. As ordinary people in America got poorer and poorer, he realized that they wanted to see films about a different kind of world. They wanted films that showed the wonderful lives of rich, beautiful people. They wanted to go to the cinema and get away from their problems. Goldwyn decided that people in his films should wear the best and the most expensive clothes in the world. And so, he went to the top fashion designer in the world, Coco Chanel. Coco understood his idea immediately, and she was interested. "How much will you pay me?" she asked. $1 million, said Goldwyn. With an offer of so much money, how could Coco refuse? She went to Hollywood, she met the film stars, and then she started work on their clothes. Everyone waited to see the results. The first film was called Tomorrow or Never, and its star was Gloria Swanson. In the film, her clothes were beautiful, but they were quite simple. When the film was shown in the US, people were surprised. They had expected something more for $1 million. When an American newspaper wrote about the film, it said, "Chanel wants a lady to look like a lady. Hollywood wants a lady to look like two ladies." Chanel kept the money, but Sam Goldwyn decided not to use her clothes again. Back in Paris, Coco had more problems. The French economy was in a very bad state. People without work wanted jobs, and the people with jobs wanted more money. Bosses like Coco had everything, while it was hard for many French people to feed their families. In the middle of the 1930s, Coco's business employed around 4,000 people. She thought she was good to the people who worked for her, but some of them had a different opinion. In 1936, 50 of her workers stopped work and sat down in one of her factories in Paris. Coco put on her best suit and rushed to speak to them, but they had locked the door of her factory and she couldn't get in. Coco was very angry. How could they do this to her? She and her workers argued and argued, but they couldn't agree on a solution to their differences. Coco's reply showed that she was a very tough businesswoman. She sacked 300 of them. But still they refused to change their minds. Coco now had an even more serious problem. She had designed some new clothes for a fashion show, and she was worried that they wouldn't be ready. What could she do? She decided to give her workers what they wanted, but she never forgot what they had done to her. At around this time, Coco started to go out with a rich German man called Hans Gunther von Dinklage. She always called him Von D. Nobody knew exactly what Von D was doing in Paris, but many people thought that he was a spy for Germany's Nazi government. This didn't worry Coco, and the two of them started to live together in the expensive Paris Ritz Hotel. But while Coco and Von D enjoyed their life, Europe moved closer to war. In 1938, Hitler's German army marched into Czechoslovakia. The next year, the Germans marched into Poland, and the Second World War began. Although Coco's business had done well in the First World War, she decided that she didn't want to work through another war. Perhaps she was still angry with her workers after the problems of 1936. Or perhaps she had just had enough of business. But for whatever reason, in 1939, Coco closed her fashion business and all her workers lost their jobs. Many people were angry with her and asked her to change her mind, but she simply told them, "This is no time for fashion." Through the winter of 1939 and into 1940, the French people waited and worried. In 1940, the German army arrived and took control of Paris. Many French people started secret groups and continued to fight the Germans, but not Coco. She was happy in her rooms at the Ritz Hotel with her German boyfriend, and she just wanted to enjoy her life. The war hadn't closed the theatres and shops of Paris, so she could still go out and do what she wanted. But as her fashion business was now closed, she needed to find other ways of making money. She knew that her perfume, Chanel No. 5, was still very popular with the French and German women who were living in Paris. She also knew that her partner in the perfume business, Pierre Wertheimer, had left France to get away from the war and was now living in the US. Coco thought she saw an opportunity to take control of the whole perfume business. But although Wertheimer was on the other side of the Atlantic, he was not going to allow this to happen. Chanel No. 5 made him so much money that he didn't want to lose control of it. Coco, Wertheimer, and their lawyers started to argue about it. But while Coco and Wertheimer fought for control of Chanel No. 5, the Germans were slowly losing control of the war. In June 1944, the British and the Americans landed on the beaches of the west of France and started to move towards Paris. 2 months later, they were just outside the city. The Germans realized that they were beaten and started to leave. The people of Paris opened the doors of their houses, had parties, and danced in the streets. But Coco wasn't so happy. She knew that many French people were angry with people who had helped the Germans in the war, and they wanted to punish them. Would they want to punish Coco? She wasn't going to wait to find out. When the war ended, she left France and went to live abroad. For most of the next 8 years, Coco lived quietly in Switzerland. She soon found out that she was so rich that she didn't need to work. She continued to argue with Pierre Wertheimer about the control of Chanel No. 5 from her new Swiss home. But when he returned to France after the war, they found a way to solve their problems. Wertheimer kept control of the perfume business, but he agreed to pay Coco 2% of the money from sales of the perfume around the world. This meant that Coco was now earning around $1 million a year, and she didn't even have to get out of bed in the morning. As the years passed, some people still remembered the beautiful Chanel clothes from the years before the war, but they soon forgot the rich old lady who had designed them. Although Coco now had everything that she wanted, she didn't really like her new life. She had loved her work, and now she missed the world of fashion. She still read fashion magazines and looked carefully at all the new designs. But Coco found that more and more often she didn't like what she saw. The new star designer in the fashion world was a Frenchman called Christian Dior. In 1947, he produced his new look. His shirts and jackets were tight and made it difficult for women to breathe. His skirts and dresses were narrow at the waist and wide at the bottom, and they reached down to women's shoes. Women loved Dior's clothes. They were very different to the boring clothes and uniforms that they had had to wear during the war years. They were also very different to the Chanel look of the years before the war. Every year, Christian Dior's new look made Coco more and more angry. In 1953, she decided that she couldn't sit and watch and do nothing. She had to return to the fashion business. She returned to Paris and started to design new clothes for a fashion show the next year. Many people thought she was crazy. "What does a 70-year-old woman know about modern fashion?" they asked. "Doesn't she know that times have changed?" But Coco didn't listen, and on the 5th of February 1954, she introduced her new designs at a fashion show in Paris. The show was a disaster. The newspapers said that they were clothes for old ladies and country people. Coco was upset and angry that her designs had been criticized so strongly. "These people just don't understand," she said. "It's true that I'm old, but I'm still one of the greatest designers in the world. I changed women's fashion once, and I know I can change it again. I'll show them." So Coco didn't return to Switzerland, and she didn't stop working. The next year, she produced some different designs for another fashion show, and this time many people liked them. The year after that, there was another new show, and more people started to admire her clothes. By the end of the 1950s, she was again one of the most important fashion designers in the world. During the 1960s, rich and beautiful women from all over the world visited Coco's offices to ask for advice and to buy new suits and skirts and dresses. Coco was rich and successful, but nobody really knew if she was happy. For the final 17 years of her life, she lived alone in the Ritz Hotel in Paris. Every morning she walked across the road to work in the offices above one of her shops. She was often still cutting cloth and making dresses late at night. Why did she work so hard? She once said, "Work has always been a kind of drug for me." If work was her drug, it was a drug that helped her to live for a long time. She was still designing new clothes for the world's top women when she died in 1971. She was 87 years old. Today, Chanel is still one of the most important names in fashion and cosmetics. But the modern House of Chanel is very different to Coco's old company. A new boss, the German designer Karl Lagerfeld, joined the company in 1983 and introduced several new ideas. He saw that the company could use Chanel's famous name to sell many different products all over the world. Soon the company had shops in over 40 countries. The Chanel name was on hats, belts, jewelry, clothes and handbags, as well as on many different kinds of cosmetics. Chanel's products were bought by many more women than ever before. But if Coco was still alive today, she would probably be pleased with many things about the modern company. She could walk into the best shop in any big city in the world and buy her Chanel No. 5 perfume, and it would still be in the same square bottle. She could walk into a Chanel shop and still find smart suits and beautiful dresses in the simple Chanel tradition. In her work as a designer, Coco Chanel loved simple styles because she believed that a woman was always more important than the dress that she wore. "Dress badly," she once said, "and people will notice the dress. Dress well, and people will notice the woman." In her life, people noticed Coco Chanel, not just because of wonderful clothes, but also because she was the first and most successful international businesswoman of the 20th century.